My name is Matt. For those of you who don't know, maybe some visitors, I am a worship and media pastor here, and we've got a handful of folks out. Thomas and Kathy are in, but you see Thomas is hobbling a little bit. He just had an operation on his knee this week, so pray for continued recovery there. And Thomas is over our children's ministry, and Dan and Vicky are out. They're our pastoral team and prophetic team leaders. And of course, the oversight here, our lead minister, Apostle Clay Nash, and he's in maybe every 6 weeks or so since the transition to Arkansas. And we're just blessed by great leaders in this house, aren't we? Yeah. Super blessed. And I'm thankful to be counted and honored to be counted among them, and particularly honored, excited, and just overjoyed to have the Withrows back in this area. Of course, they were in Virginia for 5 years, 4 years. It feels like forever. I'm so glad you're back, man. We welcome you back. But yeah, let's just get into the message today. I want to share this morning on relationships. Everyone say relationships. There's been something stirring in my heart about the way the kingdom works. Oh yes, we need to dismiss the children. Thomas told me, children. Let's give the children a hand and bless them as they go. Carlito, what's up, man? Good to see you. He's just gonna hang out here with us. Carlos. But yeah, we'll bless our children to go minister to the Lord. That's good. Very good. So many kids here. It's good to have the house of the Lord feeling full this morning. But they're grown. They're homegrown. Yeah, so I want to talk about relationships this morning because there's something so key. The Lord was speaking to me here recently in the last probably month about how it's not sufficient for us to just have a relationship with God. It's not his plan for us to just exist with him. He designed us for relationship. You guys know that's like my life message is community, relationship, family. But I've been digging in deeper into this and just been really feeling stirred about it since about November when I heard from Dutch share about how God's heart is to engage us at the personal level first, and then move to a community and then a corporate level. And the order of God is stewarding intimacy and then stewarding community and then stewarding nations. So I really feel stirred about that and want to speak into that. So let's just go before the Lord. And Lord, I just ask you this morning that my words be surrendered to your heart and to your word, God, that your living word, that your active word that is sharper than any double-edged sword would pierce this morning, and that would ignite our hearts to live a kingdom life, to live a biblical life, to live a life full of power and blessing, and to transform us, to change us, to conform us to your word. And God, I surrender. I take a deep breath and just ask you to have your way. Let your presence come and blow in this place, refresh our hearts, empower us, equip us, align us in Jesus' name. God's people said, Amen. Amen. Very good. So back in November, I don't know, I was in New Jersey with Dutch, and he was speaking, I think, with Francis Miles and a handful of folks, and I heard him say this, that God's heart is to engage us first at the personal level, and then the community and the corporate, and then for nations. And just his statement, he wasn't even preaching about that, but he said that, and it just ignited something in me and really stirred me. So probably for the last, I guess that would have been about 8 months ago, I kind of left it as a note to dig into, and I've been digging into it every few months or so since then. But it really made so much sense to me as someone who's a Bible teacher, someone who's teaching students in the scriptures and talking about community. I teach at a college, and so we're always talking community and life and relationships. And this is what I begin to uncover, is that when God created Adam first in the garden, he creates actually Adam last almost in the garden. He creates all the birds and the fish and everything according to its kind, but then he creates Adam according to his kind. And Adam knew companionship. God knew companionship was key. That's why he created Adam, and God walked with Adam in the garden. But he also knew that companionship just with himself and Adam wasn't sufficient, because the first thing that wasn't good in the garden was that man was alone. And so he creates Eve, and so female comes, and female is the ultimately the last thing God creates, which is amazing, right? It's like the pinnacle of God's creation is man. Not really, it's woman. And so it wasn't good enough that man was alone. He created woman, and then out of man and woman, a family and a community and generations and nations. And so if you think about that, Adam, intimacy, the personal companionship, and then Adam and Eve, family, which, how many of you know family's not easy? We discovered that pretty quickly, like Genesis 2, right? We're not even like a chapter in and they screw stuff up. Family's not easy. And you can blame it on the woman, you can blame it on the man, it doesn't matter. They're all blaming each other anyway, but family is hard. And then there's even Cain and Abel out of Adam and Eve. That was messy. The first homicide in human history is the first family in human history. I like how Jordan Peterson calls Cain and Abel the first actual humans in the earth. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, because they actually were born, whereas Adam and Eve were created. Not that they weren't human, but they actually Cain and Abel came into this world as children, as infants, and they were reared and raised, and then Cain kills Abel. Okay, I just fast forwarded a whole bunch of theology and time, but family is messy. It's not easy. Of course, Seth comes after Abel is killed by his brother. And ultimately, though, even before Cain and Abel came, God gives Adam and Eve a promise in the garden. And that's Genesis chapter 3, saying that he, the Messiah, will crush the serpent's head, and although he'll bruise his heel. But he's giving a promise that the Messiah, generations and a nation later, will conquer the evil one. And so even though a promise comes before there's a development of a generation or a family, I don't know if you're following me here, but God starts with a person, an intimacy, a companionship. Then he will even give a promise that doesn't look like it's going to happen. But he gives a promise, and then he sends you on the journey to develop that promise through family, through community, and ultimately into the corporate and into the nation and the nations. And so if you look at, I call that the order of the garden, Adam, Eve, family, and then the promise of a nation, the promise of ultimately the Messiah crushing the enemy. But then if you look at the flood in Genesis chapter 6, God wipes out the world and rebuilds with Noah first. God had covenant, companionship, and relationship with Noah, and then subsequently Noah's family, a community, and then generations, and ultimately nations, because Noah came from the line of Seth, who was the third-born child of Adam and Eve. Okay, follow me here. Noah comes from Seth's line, and then Abraham in Genesis 12 comes from Noah's line. Are you with me? And so ultimately, the nation that God establishes in Abraham comes from the promise way, way back of Adam and God's companionship with him, cultivating into family. Noah, God's promise with him, cultivating into family, into ultimately a nation in Abraham. Now think about this. Even Abraham has companionship with God and has a promise from God and says, I will make you a great nation, and he hasn't even had any babies yet, and he's 80 years old, and he's still living with his mom and dad. He's still living in his mom and dad's basement, and he's 80 years old, and God's like, hey, leave your family and go to a place that I will show you. Companionship, partnership, and then out of that promise cultivates further companionship with God, but family, and then a nation. And so God will give you a promise. I said God will give you a promise, a big promise, but he doesn't start big with you. When he gives you a call to the nations, it doesn't mean that you're ready to go to the nations. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of amens today, but it means you need to steward the intimacy with God properly and find relationships and community that will get behind you to believe with you and send you into the nations. God doesn't want you to be a solo, a rogue, disagreeable, aloof, hunkered down, a hermit. He wants you to be a community. He wants you to be a part of a community. He doesn't want you to be a went one. He wants you to be a sent one. So even the Great Commission that says, go therefore, it's a command. It's a sending forth. It's a commissioning. We have to be sent ones, not went ones, okay? When you're a went one, you go on your own. You say, I've got an idea here. I'm going to do it this way. But when you're a sent one, you go with power from on high. Are you with me? When you're a sent one, you're not the only one. There's a community. There's a covenant with you. There is an alignment behind you. And how many of you know there's power in that alignment? Okay, I know you guys are with me. So God starts with Abraham, the intimacy, the companionship, then family. And family is messy. Right? God had to deal with Abraham and his family before he gave him a nation, before a nation came. So when God calls Abraham and says, leave your household and go to a place I will show you. Remember Abraham, 80 years old, was living in his parents' basement, and God says, leave your family and go to a place I will show you. And he says, and he takes Lot with him. He compromises. Are you guys with me? You guys understand this? He takes Lot with him. And there's a lot of troubles there with Lot and him. That's family. And listen to me. Lot was not evil people. Lot was good people. Lot was family. Abraham couldn't let go of Lot. He loved him a lot. Hey, you guys did the joke, not me, okay? I'm laughing at you. So Lot's good people, but Abraham hangs on to good people, forsaking the greater promise. And I mentioned this earlier, but sometimes the road to the promise is not through the good people that you're staying within your life. It's through the right people that God wants to put in your life. Just because it's good doesn't mean it's God. This is a word for somebody today. I know I'm not going to get a lot of amens, but just because it's good doesn't mean it's God. And listen, I see some mature believers in the house this morning. I see some maturity. I see some wisdom. I see some on fire, passion, zeal, and wisdom. You guys know that the enemy is not going to come and tempt you with some evil and be like, look at this evil thing, and try to get you and persuade you to come to do his thing. The enemy actually persuades you with a whole bunch of good, something that looks good enough to pull you away from what the promise is. So it could be that the good relationships in your life that you're holding on to, like Abraham held on to Lot, are keeping you from the ultimate greater and blessing of God in your life. I just went on a rabbit trail, but I know it was good. Your personal, let's get back to this message, your personal just relationship, your companionship with God is not sufficient. It wasn't sufficient in the garden. It wasn't sufficient with even Abraham. God wanted to build a nation. That was the end goal, to build a nation. Why build a nation? So the Messiah could come. Every promise God ever made to man and woman in the garden in Genesis 3, to Noah in Genesis 6, to Abraham in Genesis 12, and to Moses and on, was about raising up a nation so that the Messiah could come, because he had it in mind, because he knew the end from the beginning. And he knows your end from the beginning. And when he gives you a promise and he calls you to do great things and go to the nations, it doesn't mean that you're ready to do great things or ready to go to the nations, but that you need to cultivate that companionship with him first, and then build around you this community, this alignment to send you forth. And when I say community, I know I'm using this lingo: community, relationship, covenant, family. I'm talking about spiritual fathers and mothers. I'm talking about a spiritual community around you, brothers and sisters. I'm talking about wisdom in a multitude of counsel. I'm talking about a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Are you with me? I know I'm not naming off and citing a lot of scriptures, but you guys know I'm pouring out scriptures in this message, okay? So there's a friend that sticks closer to a brother. There's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. And we have to be careful that we're not just hearing from me and God. We have to have the covenant, the companionship. We have to have the Jonathan and Davids. We have to have the Elijah and Elishas. We have to have the Moses and Aarons. Even when God calls Moses, he doesn't just call him to do it alone. He had Miriam, he had Aaron, he ultimately had Joshua and Caleb and people around him, great leaders around him, that undergirded the call of God on his life. We need one another. So I guess my first point. I don't know if we have any points here. Just listening close, take notes. You'll never be successful, consistently thriving at loving other people and staying in relationship with them if you're not first consistent and thriving in your love for God and staying in relationship with him. We have to desire this community, this relationship, this covenant with others. We have to desire leadership in our lives. We do. We can't be renegades. We can't be rogues. We can't be aloof. We can't just be me and God. We've got to get the spiritual alignment in our lives. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are with me. But think about this. So think about a time in your life when you knew that the relationships were not consistent. They weren't thriving. They weren't successful. Boil it all back down to your relationship with God. Are you zealous and passionate and consistent? Not even just zealous and passionate, because zeal without, come on, help me. Zeal without knowledge, right? We have to have consistent covenant relationship with God. And it starts with that intimacy with God. And from that intimacy with God, he's going to open doors and bring people into our lives that are going to undergird the vision that God has for us. And it's that community that undergirds us that helps us be sent ones, not went ones. It helps us to go forth into the callings that God, the promises that God has put on our lives. You can't do it alone. This means that there's a tension in your personal intimacy with God, a tension, not attention. There is a tension even in your personal intimacy with God that will result in a lack of satisfaction, even between you and God, unless you are aligned properly with family and community. And this is the alignment you need, alignment which will prepare you for the conquest in the gifting and the promise God's called you to. The gifting that God's called you to express and the promise that God's called you to get. You have to have community. Like I said, the fathering, the mothering, the spiritual leaders, the brothers, the sisters, the counsel, the friend that's closer than a brother, in order to step fully into the promises of God. Let me rattle off a few examples. Adam couldn't do it alone. It was not good that he was alone. Noah had his family, not just God. Abraham needed a family to see a nation birthed. Moses had to step out and lead, but wasn't without Miriam and Aaron and eventually Joshua and Caleb, which was iron sharpening iron. It was them sharpening Moses, but it was Moses sharpening them, because ultimately Joshua led them into the promised land. David, when isolated, fell into the worst decision of his life. When isolated, when not at war, when he should have been at war. When not with the prophets, when he should have been listening to the prophets. Are you with me? But when in the company of the prophets, David thrived and excelled and put his trust in God because he knew the promise and he was around the prophets. Elijah and Elisha is an example. Even Jesus had the 12. And within the 12, he had the 3. Peter, James, and John. The idea that Jesus needed anything is a dangerous proposition, I know. But it was actually his mother that told him there needed to be more wine when he turned the water into wine. Think about that. Even Jesus' own mother was like, hey, come over here. They need some wine. You, disciples, do what he says. Jesus and his mother pushing him forth into his ministry. The first miracle he ever did was not him doing it on his own in his ministry. It was his mama going, hey, baby, time to go. Let go. Paul, Barnabas, Silas, John Mark, Timothy, Titus. We could go on in the New Testament, in the epistles. Paul traveled with John Paul and Barnabas and Silas and Timothy and Titus, the spiritual son to Paul. They were in ministry together. This is an identifier of the conquest of the gospel in our world, spreading throughout the Middle East, into Asia, into Europe. It was with community. It was with those who didn't do it on their own. And there's always a temptation to do it on your own. And I don't know if I should take this rabbit hole, this rabbit trail, but Paul got really frustrated with John Mark because John Mark abandoned them. That's how Paul describes it. And then he says, don't send me John Mark. John Mark abandoned me. There is always going to be a temptation to, say, get frustrated at relationships because they're messy, right? Because they're not easy. But even at the end of Paul's life, he says, send John Mark. He is still good to me. Because somewhere between John Mark jumped ship on us and let us down and the end of Paul's life, there was some kind of restoration or realization there that we need each other. That, you know what? You might not do it the way I want to do it, or the way I would do it, or the way that I want you to do it. Any leaders understand what I'm saying here? Just because we have differences doesn't mean we have to let those differences drive a wedge in the promises that God has for us. So I thought about this. I love that my wife is going into clinical work. And you guys know I love bringing scientific research and clinical stuff to the messages. She shared me this out of one of her texts. Dr. Lee Williams, probably a therapist. He wrote a book on essential assessments and skills for family therapy. And he wrote this. He said, social isolation and loneliness are additional risk factors. Perhaps the core quality of being human is the need for connection with other human beings. For the last 42 years, George Vaillant has followed 268 men who graduated from Harvard and are now in their 80s or dead. He has sought to understand these men's successes and failures and the measure of their lives. He observed how these men faced life. And so he observed 268 men from about the time they're in their mid-40s till they're in their mid-80s or passed away. And he writes, he says, it's social aptitude, not intellectual brilliance or parental social class that leads to successful aging. Warm connections are necessary, and if not found in a mother or father, they can come from siblings, uncles, friends, mentors. The men's relationships at age 47, he found, predicted later in life. He predicted later life adjustments better than any other variable except defenses. So basically what he's saying is, didn't matter how intellectually entrepreneurial they were or whether they came from successful parents, it was their relationships that helped their aging. Good sibling relationship seems especially powerful. Valent was asked, what have you learned from the Grant study, men? This was the study he did, the Grant study. And his response, the only thing that really matters in life are your relationships to other people. Strong social and emotional ties means that clients have resources from others when they face challenging times. Can y'all hear the kingdom in that? Attachments buffer clients as they face adversity and in general. Of course, this is a book on therapy. So he's saying attachments buffer clients as they face adversity and in general, the personality trait of extroversion is associated with positive mental and physical health outcomes. Increasing social ties creates positive health outcomes, such as increased immunity against illnesses and a sense of well-being. In contrast, social isolation and loneliness predicts worsening outcomes in mental and physical health, like your immunity. Interesting how even our bodies are designed from a cellular level, and I've preached this before too. I've had some other scientific examples of how generosity actually does something to us on a molecular level. So does our social structures, our communities. And when you have a healthy, vibrant community around you, you're actually healthier physically. And of course, you're healthier spiritually. Are you with me? I want to say this as well, because this is a principle I've learned from my spiritual father. And of course, you guys know, Apostle Clay says, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. So think about that if you haven't heard that. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And when God speaks to you, you still see things as you are. Follow me here. If you're in isolation, not in a multitude of counsel, not in community, not thriving in covenant and in family, you'll even hear what God is saying incorrectly, because you'll hear it through the lens of who you are. And you may walk in that in an unhealthy way. Whereas if you had a multitude of counsel and you had wisdom in your life and you had that friend that sticks closer than a brother, and when the Lord speaks to you and God wants to use the relationships around you and align you properly, it fuels God's promise in your life. Are you with me? I know this is not popular, but because the way you see things and the way God wants you to see things is important. He wants you healthy and in relationship and in community. Therefore, God's greatest direction to you or even his fulfillment of that promise and direction in your life is going to come alive when you're in healthy alignment, covenant, and community. Are you with me? So I want to say that the personal covenant relationship with God, your companionship with God, can reflect anointing. But your corporate level of engagement in your community and in your along the way with your call reflects authority. There's a difference between anointing and authority. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying. So you can see anointing on somebody, but you know when you see authority on somebody. Clay describes authority. He says, how do you describe authority? He says, authority is. What is it? It is. You know authority when it walks in the room. Like when a child is misbehaving and a mother says, just wait till your dad gets home. Authority was there before dad got home. Authority just is. And when you operate from a place of alignment and you have authority in your life and you have covenant in your life and you have relationships and thriving community, you can function from a place of not just anointing, but authority. And it's anointing that can break the yoke. But it's authority that can pull down strongholds and tear down principalities. And I'm not here just to be anointed and just to have a little blessing from God and to be me, oh my. I'm here to carry some authority in the kingdom, and we're here to tear down some strongholds, and we need each other to do that. Amen? We need some alignment to do that. There's going to be some tension in that because family and relationships are not easy. They're hard. So, I want to wrap this up and maybe share a few notes. I don't know if I can expand on some of these. I ran out of time this week. Personal covenant relationship with God. Too long without community can deflect authority in your life. Because God wants to build a community around you to send you forth. And going public or going into your promise and anyone try to help God? Like, I'm just trying to make this promise happen that you gave me. Going too quickly and into the corporate and into the public without that personal discipline in God and that community around you can destroy you. But then also staying personal and intimate too long without maturing into community in any arena will also destroy you. Are you seeing what I'm saying? We have to have that first love with God. We have to have that companionship with God. And then he's going to build us into a community and a family. And then he's going to send us forth into our promise to take nations. And I just have to say about relationships, guys, because they're hard, they're not easy. And they're not easy for me. Just because I get up here and preach doesn't mean all my relationships are perfectly and in order and everything's just a well-oiled machine. We have to work through our relationships. We have to work through our family dynamics. We have to have conversations, hard conversations, healthy conversations. We have to have those. And we have to seek to be in right standing with one another. It says I think it's in Peter, where it says, 1 Peter maybe, where it says, do everything in your power to be at peace with everyone around you. We have to seek that. And in your conversations, are you trying to win? Are you trying to be right? Or are you trying to be righteous? Because if we're trying to be righteous and we're trying to honor and we're trying to love and we're trying to maintain the relationships that God wants us to have, then we don't need to seek out and try to be right. We need to seek out right standing. And we need to humble ourselves. God doesn't want you to be right. He wants you to be obedient. Someone needs to write that down. He doesn't want you to be right. He wants you to be obedient. So I shared this at the beginning, I think, and during worship and even at the beginning of this message, so I'll bring it full circle. Good relationships in your life could be what's keeping you from the right relationships that God has for you. Good people, Lot and Abraham, good people in your life. Good family in your life. That's who Lot was. Good family for Abraham. But it was causing contention. It was causing troubles when it came to the promise of God for Abraham. And you know the sovereignty of God? I've been thinking about this a lot this week. The sovereignty of God is that He loves us so much that even when we miss the promise, He still pushes us along and blesses us and keeps us going. It's kind of messed up, actually, because think about how Abraham was actually thriving while he was compromising with Lot. I mean, he was thriving so much that, like, Abraham's livestock and cattle were in conflict with Lot's livestock and cattle and land, and that's where there was some contention. And here's another interesting point, that Lot was getting blessed because God was blessing Abraham. And what's interesting about Abraham remaining with Lot is that God was still blessing Abraham and loving Abraham along the way, but he knew that he needed to surrender Lot. That's the sovereignty of, think about it this way. Is it Jacob who wanted Rachel? Am I getting the story right? Jacob said, that's my girl. And he had to work for 7 years. And then he ends up with his sister, or with her sister, Leah, right? So this is really fascinating to me, that Jacob's promise and his pursuit was Rachel. But for 7 years he worked, and I don't know how all this works. It's kind of bizarre. He somehow ends up marrying and getting in the wedding bed with Leah. Like, oops, after 7 years of working hard for this, I end up with Leah. But the sovereignty of God is that God actually blesses Jacob and Leah and gives them fruit and children. And then he had to work again to get Rachel, and God blessed that. But sometimes there's a barrenness in one promise because there's something else happening, another door that you've gone down, but God still blesses it somehow. I know that's a whole message in and of itself. But the sovereignty of God is that even when you open the door that you're not supposed to open, God's like, hey, listen, I still got you. I got you. I need you to recorrect and adjust and get over here back to where the promise actually is. And then when you get to where the promise actually is, that's where the bigger blessing is. And we need to learn to stop compromising and let go. But even if we have, God's like, listen, child, I got you. You need to readjust and recorrect and get on the promised path. Just like with Abraham and Sarah, there was times where Abraham wasn't perfect, and he said, Sarah's my sister and this and that, and God still blessed him. Like, that's kind of messed up. That's the sovereignty of God, is that God's like, yeah, shouldn't have done that. But he adjusts, micro-adjusts, and pulls him back into the promise. But Abraham had to let go of things. He had to let go of good relationships. And I feel the word this morning is that there's good relationships that you're in that are not the promise of God for your life. Because the enemy doesn't tempt you, a mature child of God, with evil. He tempts you with just enough good to get you off the promise. And we need to be discerning and recognize, oh, this person's good. They're good people. But this is not what God asked. This is not the promise. This is not the right people. So I believe God's asking us to surrender good relationships to get into the right relationships that take us to the promise. Come on, let's stand to your feet and pray into this. Did I go somewhere okay today? I believe, God's been challenging me with this relationship stuff. I mean, we've been asking the Lord, this isn't easy. What do you want us to do? And he says, keep going, keep trekking along, keep pushing. There's right relationships, there's good relationships. You got to discern between the two. And there is a promise on your life, a big promise, a nation's promise on your life, but it doesn't mean you're ready for nations. It means that he's given you the promise, and your stewardship is first your companionship with God, and then building the community around you. And you can't build it. If you could build it, you could get the credit, and God doesn't want to have anything to do with that. He wants to open doors for you. He wants that relationship and those connections and those covenant partnerships to happen in such a way where you're like, how did that happen? What in the world? That, when you have relationships like that in your life, pay attention. God's like, I'm doing something. It might not be easy. It might be tricky, but I'm doing something. And when you know, you've tasted and seen the goodness of God. And I want to share this with you because I had this word during worship this morning when Kinsey was singing, I want to see a victory, or I'm going to see a victory. That's an interesting statement. I know I'm maybe taking a left turn here, but I'm going to see a victory, or I see a victory. I see a victory. Taste and see that the Lord is good. You know, I had a revivalist friend of mine come see us in April, Chris Burns, and he was here and he did a conference with us at downtown at the college. And I mean, he's a revivalist. He's been in revivals and Moves of God and run with Lou Engle and some of the greats, you know. And I was telling him what was happening at the college, and he got to be there and see like the prayer room stuff and students just going before the Lord and just revival breaking out in the student body. And he looked at me at the end of that and he said, Matt, there's a revival happening here. I know a revival when I see one, and I see a revival. And that encouraged me. But you know what? When you see a revival and you know, then you know that you know. And when you have seen a victory in your life before, you know that you know what it looks like. And you go, oh, I see it coming. I see it coming. And when you've seen God provide for you in the past, that's your testimony, and you can go, oh, I see it happening again, because you've tasted and seen of that victory, of that glory, of that provision, whatever it is. And I just believe so much that because you've tasted of the testimony and you've seen God work, you can carry and you can know in your spirit, oh, I know when I know that that's it. And let me just tell you that the good relationships in your life, that you don't sense that I know it, you got to be spiritually discerning to go after the promises of God in your life. Which means you've got to have the right fathering and mothering and leadership and a friend that sticks closer than a brother and wisdom and a multitude of counsel in a community that doesn't make you a went one, but makes you a sent one. That you don't just go doing your own thing with God, but you go with strength and you go with authority and you go with power. I believe there's promises all over this room that are covered in God's blessing and God's word, prophetic word over your life. And he wants you to have the right relationships. He wants you to align yourself in the right community for that to thrive, for that to excel. So Lord, whatever that looks like for us, the right relationships, but God, companionship consistently with you. Stir our hearts, God, to consistently have zeal and passion for you and your word. And Lord, I just see the Lord opening up doors in your life, new relationships, opportunities. God's going to open up some doors. But listen, there's going to be other doors that open themselves up as well, and they're going to look good, and they're going to look appealing, but stick to the promise. Stick to what God has spoken over your life. It's going to take spiritual discernment, because the things of God are spiritually discerned, not naturally discerned. And so the opportunities that present themselves that look to our mind's eye and to our culture's eye and to our economy's eye as success, we have to be careful, because God has a strategy to give you what his plan is, and it's going to be aligned with the promise that he has for you. Lord, what does that look like? I just want to wait on you for a moment this morning, God. What does it look like to align ourselves with the promise? What does it look like to shed off even the good relationships with good people, with good family, that might not be in alignment with the promises you've given us? Some of you have gotten a word for nations, but you're not ready yet for nations, and that's okay. God called Abraham to be, he said, I'm going to make a great nation out of you. I could just imagine Abraham going, all right, well, I don't have any kids. And that's how God's promises work. He says, I'm going to send you to the nations. And you're like, well, I don't have a passport. Well, and then you begin to take steps and trust God. Abraham even compromised with his Ishmael. But because the sovereignty of God is that he'll still bless that seed, but he'll always push you to the promise. And some of you have a big promise, a nation's call on your life, and it doesn't make sense. Just stick to it. Endurance is the word. Your companionship with God is first love, and the community that he's building around you, and spiritual fathers and mothers, friends that stick closer than a brother, and wisdom and a multitude of counsel. God's aligning that in your life to send you into your promise. Do you receive it? Say, I receive it, Lord. Bless the Lord. Well, I think that's what we came to do today. Is that good? I just want to... You are good people. You are the right people. And I'm really thankful for many of you in our lives that are our covenant people, that are our right people, that have sent us forth. You guys have sent us to Europe and sent us places and commissioned us to do things in music and ministry. And we need that. We can't do it without the decade that we've been here building and allowing God to open up the right doors when other doors did open themselves up to us. And we had to say, no, this is where our covenant people are. And we've had to turn things down. And it's been hard sometimes. You know, I just personally, let me just share this. When we first came here about almost 10 years ago now, this August, September, we met Ian and Bree. We met some other good young friends that became like this young group of worshipers and musicians, and in a matter of, I don't know, a handful of years, you know, people went their different directions, went through different places, Our good friends Mike and Jess moved away. And then you guys moved away. And I was not really happy about that. I was like, Lord, all our people are gone. And not that you got, those of you that have been here all the years, we love you. But it was like Jesus had the 12 and he had the 3, right? It was like that our 3, like our people had moved on and gone places, and we commissioned them and blessed them. But Natalie and I were like, what should we do? What's next for us? And you know what? We stuck where our covenant was. We stayed with authority. We stayed with our community, and we stuck it out. And it wasn't easy, but the blessing and promise of God has been on that. And it's okay if it gets hard sometimes, because relationships are hard. It's okay if it gets hard sometimes because family is hard. But it's sticking it out and seeing it through where you'll really come into the blessing of God when he has you where he needs you to be. Amen. So I just bless you with that quick testimony of my own, and send you forth this week with this word. I pray it stirs in you something and brings something out and aligns you, right? Because that's why we gather here. We're an apostolic house. We're an equipping house. You're not going to get no fancy feel-good message. You're going to get an aligning message. So I pray this has been aligning and equipping for you to shift you this week. And I will see you guys next week for Tony Kemp on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And we're going to get some equipping and aligning in those meetings. So be here on Friday night at 7 p.m. We'll see you guys then. God bless you guys.